Hey guys, and welcome to my channel, Go Where You Grow. I'm Stacy Baker, and for those of you that don't know me, I am on a journey for personal growth and self-improvement. And today I want to talk to you all about something that I think is majorly underrated, I should say. And that is insulin and the role that it plays on our metabolic health. I've got a few notes here because this is kind of a deep topic and I want to make sure that I touch points on all of the things that I wanted to discuss with you guys today. So bear with me. But first off, metabolic health and why is metabolic health important? First of all, metabolic health is determined by 5 different measurements. When we're looking at metabolic health, we look at blood sugar, we look at triglycerides, we look at your HDL, we look at your blood pressure, and we also look at your waist circumference. Those are the 5 measurements that determine your metabolic health. And why those 5 things are important and knowing what your metabolic health is because when any of those 5 elements are affected, it's directly associated with you having a significantly higher risk of heart disease, diabetes, and stroke. So it's important to pay attention to your metabolic health. What that also means is that if you don't have good metabolic health, you're at high risk for those things. So my precaution for everyone is when we're talking about things like insulin and metabolic health, don't automatically associate that if you have no weight problems or if you've never been diagnosed diabetic or don't have any symptoms of diabetes, don't think that that means that understanding insulin and understanding your metabolic health isn't important, because it is. And I'm going to explain to you why. There's a study that was published in the journal Metabolic Syndrome and Related Disorders back in 2018. And researchers at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, evaluated data from over 8,000 adults. And it was over a 7-year span that they collected that data. And what they found was that only 1 in 8 of the adults actually had optimal metabolic health. And so what that equates out to, that ratio implies that only about 12% of Americans are actually truly metabolically healthy. That's a significantly low number of Americans. So this is why I say I think that we need to be aware of insulin and how it affects our metabolic health, so that you can catch a problem before it becomes a big problem. When you get diagnosed diabetic, it basically just means that you had pre-existing conditions, pre-existing problems, but that they just had to get to the point where they were finally bad enough that you began to display and show symptoms of being diabetic to get tested. And that's kind of why I'm making this video. You know, I want to caution people, make people aware. Don't wait that long. Don't wait until you get diagnosed with diabetes before you pay attention to insulin and your metabolic health. What I want to say too is insulin isn't the bad guy. You know, insulin is necessary. We can't live without it. It isn't the bad guy unless you're spiking it constantly. It plays an important and necessary role with allowing your cell to use sugar or glucose as energy. So let's talk about insulin for a minute. Insulin is a hormone that is secreted by the pancreas, and you actually spike insulin every time you eat. It doesn't matter how healthy of an item that you're eating, your insulin is always going to spike to some degree. Now, the severity of that spike is going to be dependent upon what you eat. If what you eat is extremely high in sugar and processed carbohydrates, then you're going to spike more insulin to digest and break that down and rid the blood of all that blood, or the blood of all that sugar. Sorry, pardon me. So you can if you think about insulin basically is what opens the door of the cell to allow that glucose to get in and be used as energy for that cell. The problem becomes when you are you're constantly eating high amounts of sugar and you're spiking your blood sugar constantly. And that causes insulin, therefore, to spike and elevate and stay elevated. And then because insulin is a hormone and it's one of your master hormones, a lot of times it has like a domino effect. Once insulin gets out of whack, a lot of your other hormones kind of get out of whack. Things become wonky. Excess insulin over time, the other issue is over time, when you have an extremely elevated level of insulin in your body, your cells actually begin to become insulin resistant. It's kind of like a communication circuit in your body. And so your cell tells your body, hey, listen, we need some insulin down here. We need to get this energy into the cell. And so the body will respond and it'll produce more insulin and so on and so forth. It's a cyclical pattern. I want to use this piece of paper here to kind of explain to you guys. So when you have consistently elevated levels of insulin and your cells begin to form a sense of insulin resistance because at some point they can't take in anymore. And so they have to close their doors and say, okay, we can't allow anybody else in. When they begin to get desensitized is when it becomes a problem, because the cycle that's supposed to play out and be a good cycle becomes a bad cycle, and this is why. So what happens is you actually eat the food and you spike insulin, and the insulin goes down to the cell. And when the cell is resistant, meaning it's already had too much insulin and it can't take in anymore, it's going to resist letting that insulin in. And the results are you have more insulin throughout your body that can't be used. And so it goes towards storing more fat. And then obesity develops. And then when obesity develops, you begin to experience issues with feelings of fatigue, and you have low blood sugar, and you have all those hormones that are being created that drive hunger and cravings because of that low blood sugar that you experience. And those hormones are going to tell you, hey, listen, we need to eat again. And so it becomes this really negative cyclical pattern. It would be a healthy pattern if it functioned and worked properly. But where the issue comes in is when you have too much insulin for too long of a period and those cells begin to become resistant. That's when this whole balance gets thrown off. And so let's talk for a minute now about diabetes. Diabetes, there's two types of diabetes. There's type 1, which is an issue with the pancreas. It's when someone's body is not able to produce enough insulin like it needs to properly, and that indicates there's an issue with the pancreas. There's type 2, which is a form of insulin resistance within the cells throughout the body. Type 1 is usually the one that has to be injected with insulin, and type 2 is one that's a little bit more easily treatable. Oftentimes medication can help with that, and so on and so forth. So going back to the insulin resistance cycle, when you're thinking about the cell and the doors, those doors become desensitized and they're no longer functioning properly. So now the cell is actually communicating, hey, we can't get, we're not getting enough insulin, and so your body begins to produce more, and it just exacerbates and becomes a problem that becomes really difficult to fix. And the thing to keep in mind, what's important to remember, is that when insulin is present in the body, you're storing fat rather than using fat as fuel. You're in the storing process rather than the utilization process. And then obesity develops. So for me, in knowing all of that and what I can't possibly fathom is why people in the medical field believe that to treat diabetes is to simply control blood sugar levels. Now, I'm not talking about, the insulin injections. I'm not talking about the medication. I'm simply talking about like when they advise someone who is diabetic to eat, they advise them to eat like 6 small meals a day. Here's my take on this and why I think that just I can't rationalize that. That doesn't make sense to me. I think that when we're focused on simply stabilizing blood sugars, we're only mitigating the symptoms of blood sugar highs and lows and not actually addressing the cause of diabetes. And I actually think that by mitigating the symptoms, we may be making the diabetic condition even worse. So I want to share with you guys a little chart here that I made. And this is not a medical chart. It's something that I drew up just to give you guys an idea of an interpretation on blood sugar highs and lows and what it is that we're doing. A standard person who eats 3 meals a day, they're going to see, morning, noon, and evening. And this would be like the increase in blood sugar and also insulin, because blood sugar and insulin are inversely related. So you're going to see that spike in blood sugar when they eat, and then that blood sugar is going to slowly decrease because they go a longer period of time every time they eat. So that longer period of time actually allows that blood sugar to drop lower. Now, this is where we run into problems with people who have a metabolic disorder such as diabetes, is that they begin to feel really crummy when that blood sugar drops that low. And then the hormones trigger and they say they need to eat more and they feel hungry and they just don't feel well. So it's the highs and lows of the blood sugar that gives diabetics the symptoms of feeling jittery and not feeling well. So for someone who eats a standard 3 meal a day, their peaks and valleys, their blood spikes and blood lows are going to be much more drastic than someone who eats 6 meals a day. Now, yes, we're achieving more stabilized blood sugars because we're eating more frequently and more close together, so we're not going as long a period of time where the blood sugar can actually drop. But at what cost? If we're keeping the blood sugars more stable, but we're also keeping them significantly more elevated throughout the day, which also means that we're also spiking insulin because we're eating more frequently. So we're actually making our body produce even more insulin than even the standard American 3 meal a day. And in my opinion, kind of exacerbating the situation. So, for me, it comes down to mitigating the symptoms so that we don't feel unwell. Yeah, but we also need to be aware of the cost. What could be the downside to that? Are we making our condition even worse? Are we really working to solve the problem? It begs the question for me, what does it look like? What would a chart look like that for a person who didn't eat quite that frequently, like intermittent fasting? What would it look like if they're able to go longer periods of time, gradually work into a progression where they're able to go longer periods of time, and during those longer periods of time, their body's able to use some of that excess insulin because they're not constantly eating and telling their body to make more. I just really think it's a riveting question, and I think it's one that we need to be more cognizant of and really start asking for ourselves. And one of the things I want to say is, I'm not in the medical field. Most of the research that I've done on my own. And so my advice to you guys is to be a responsible consumer of information. do your own research. Don't just watch a video and repeat verbatim what somebody else has said. Be a responsible consumer of information. Do your own research, but remember, nobody's going to take care of you like you will take care of you. So I think it's important that we develop those skills to think independently. No matter how intelligent, no matter how educated someone is that's coming to us with a piece of knowledge, if that piece of knowledge doesn't make sense to us, if we can't rationalize and apply it to our beliefs and what we've experienced in life, then it's okay to question. It's okay to research and wonder and buck the system a little, because like I said, the only person that cares about you like you care about you is you. Take care of yourself. Thank you guys for watching my channel. Be sure to click the subscribe button so that you can get future videos, and y'all get to watch me learn, grow, and develop and figure out how to do this YouTube thing. I'll be learning how to make videos, edit videos. Hopefully at some point I'll get experienced and comfortable enough to do some vlogging as well. Appreciate y'all being here. Y'all have a good day and take care.